Brilliant, fantastic. I think we've got most of the attendees that we're going to get. For those of you that have just joined us, hello, my name is Laura Hodgkiss. I'm the event and training team leader here at Staffordshire Chamber of Commerce, and we welcome you to our webinar this afternoon, which is Employee Motivation by the lovely Wendy Dean, and we're so happy to have Wendy here with us today. For those of you that don't know, it is an interactive session, so you can talk to us via the chat function at the bottom or the Q&A. What I would suggest is if you do have a question for Wendy, she's quite happy to answer throughout the session today, but you just need to pop that in the Q&A section and not in the chat function for me. We will be also taking questions live, so those of you that do want to answer a question live today, if you could just raise your hand, and I don't mean physically raise your hand like this, just at the bottom by your name there will be a raise hand symbol that you'll just be able to raise your hand should you want to ask a question. Brilliant, fantastic. With all that in mind, I'll pass you over to Wendy. Wendy, it's over to you.
Hi Laura, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'm glad you've joined us this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my ideas and suggestions of how to motivate employees in this very difficult time. From somebody that's been working in HR for a very long period of time, it's very difficult to motivate people when they're in the workplace. So to have people out of the workplace, to have some people on furlough, to have some people having to come back into the workplace as we're in the situation this week, I think it's very important that you have motivational techniques in your armoury, really, to try and get people to stay engaged with the company. As an HR consultant, we obviously do other things as well, but primarily this is about people today. And as a consultant, I am absolutely flabbergasted by the lack of communication that some companies are having with their people, the way that some people have been treated, and also the engagement that people have. And I think in any kind of scenario like this, it's very important to ensure that you do keep people engaged, because when this is over, people have very long memories. And what you don't do right today and what you don't do to motivate people today will probably come back to haunt you in the future. I'm not trying to give you every single scenario of how to motivate people. I have picked a few topics out of that which you'll have seen from the agenda. But it's about prompting some thought, really, and prompting some conversation for yourself and for your team to say, you know, well, what does fit us? Because there isn't a one size fits all. So I'll go through the slides. As Laura's already said, happy to take questions as we go through. We've got about an hour for this presentation, and I'm sure you don't want to hear me just talking all afternoon. So please come on with questions if you need to. So I was reading in People Management the other day about what people are doing in the current climate. And the UK Microsoft HR director, a lady named Audrey Winfield, put a statement in there which I think was quite apt, really. And they said they're putting employees and families first rather than the business. Employers are more trusted than the government and news agencies, so we need to be a source of truth for staff. And as I go through the presentation, one of the key things I'll be talking about is honesty. When we're in crisis situations, sometimes it's very hard to deliver bad news, or it's very hard to deliver things that you wouldn't normally be delivering, especially for some of your managers, team leaders, supervisors. But I think it's important that you agree on the message, but you're actually honest with that message. And what Microsoft have done, as you would expect for such a large organisation that has millions of pounds to spend on this kind of thing, is they've been really quite open with people. And when lockdown first came about, they actually managed to courier furniture out to all of their employees that would be expected to work from home. They sent them a pack out, they sent them a starter pack of stationery. And we can't all do that, but they've obviously used the resource they've got to be able to do something that's positive. And they actually started the process on the right footing. So we can't all be at Microsoft, but we can learn and we can use small elements of what other people do. And I think one of the great things about the webinars that the Chamber is running is it is giving us opportunities to talk to other people in other businesses to try and share best practice. And I think that's a great thing from Chamber membership. So if we talk about communication first of all, there's a huge sea change from the 2008 crisis. And those of you that can remember 12 years ago, it was a very quick recession that came upon us. Suddenly we were thrust into a situation. We didn't have furlough, and we had to deal with things the best we could. And a lot of companies, including the one I worked for at the time, Steelite International, went straight into a situation of short time working for the factory. And then we ended up at the end of 2008, unfortunately, making 100 people redundant. And I remembered at the time speaking to my boss and saying, you know, why are we the first pottery manufacturer to do this? Should we wait? Should we see what happens? And the key message came out of it for me was that actually, if you're going to make changes, whatever they are, good or bad, you need to communicate them, but you also need to do them quite quickly, and you need to be decisive in your action. Because one of the lessons I think we learned on communication from the 2008 recession was that people were quite slow to react. And if you don't tell people what's happening within your business and you don't give them that information, they will go one of three ways. They'll either be very scared about what's coming up, and they might say, you know, what's going to happen to me, which means then they're not productive. It affects their home life, and also you can create negativity and you can have people working against you. So the old "you are lucky to have a job" that was probably used quite a bit in 2008 because companies were in crisis is not a motivational tool. I think we can safely say that. But moving forward, we do have this opportunity now, and we have got time, and we have been able to have time to say, right, how do we look at communication? What do we do with how we communicate with people? And I'll go through a few pieces on that in a few minutes. So when we're talking about what's happening with COVID, we do need our people more than ever. It's not acceptable to just switch people off and hope that in a few months' time you ring them up or you send them a text message to say, can you come back into work? That they're going to come back bright and breezy. You know, there's a high chance that people are going to be not motivated. They'll have brain fog. They'll feel guilty about leaving their families. They'll feel unsafe because it will be the first time they've actually been out since the lockdown. And I think it's how we treat those people, because we do need them more than ever. I was talking to a lady the other day that's got a company, and she contacted her people at the weekend and said, you know, great, you know, we'd like you to come back into work. And for some reason, they translated the communication from Dominic Raab that they don't have to come back to work till October. So what's happened there is they've said to people, you know, we want you to come back to work this week. And they've said, oh, we thought it was October. And then there's been a massive gap between expectation and reality. So the likelihood is those people will come back into the workplace and feel quite demotivated. So she's now thinking of ways in which she can actually get those people motivated again. If there is no communication, people will fill in gaps themselves. And that's a fairly straightforward thing to say. Chinese whispers are a terrible thing, and having worked on a factory where there's a lot of people, you can only imagine that something that starts at one end of the factory and it ends at the other end of the factory is quite, it can be quite damning for the business. So it's about how you handle that communication. One of the key things to me is that written communication is one of the best ways of sending things out, as well as verbal, because verbal communication, if there's nothing to back it up that's got the facts on there, then people will fill in the gaps themselves, and you could end up with all sorts of crises on your hands. I think communication outside the business is important for motivation as well, because the perception of how well your company is doing versus other companies and how they're communicating is important. So for example, if you're in a company where there are other businesses doing the same thing within the same area as you, then if the other companies are doing something that's quirky or fun or motivational and you're not, there's a chance you'll feel quite demoralized yourself about that, but then you'll probably try and do things that are copying somebody else. So perception of how well your company is doing is about how you're promoting that. Whatever we think of social media, good and bad, there is a place for social media. And as a provider of social media for our clients, one of the things we've tried to do, and one of the things I try and do with my weekly blogs on LinkedIn, is to keep them positive. And there might be a few messages on there about, you know, the situation we're in, but it's about keeping things positive, because a good motivator for your people is that if they see you're positive and they see that you're, you know, being very active in what you're doing, then the chances are that they will reflect that kind of behaviour. A question that I've asked myself really over the last few weeks has been about, do we go back to basics with regards to how we treat our people? If you go back to the days of those of you that have done the theory or have done some kind of professional qualification in this, is that if you go back to the days of Cadbury and the paternalistic approach that Cadbury tried to put into its workforce of giving people housing, making sure that they've got shelter, making sure that they were well communicated with, that did carry on for quite a long time into the 80s. And there was a company, for those of you that are as old as me, will remember something called the Industrial Society. And the theory behind the Industrial Society was that they gave us templates of things of how to communicate with people, along with training resources. But it was a template that they provided that said, when you're talking about what's going on within your organisation, you need to create a core brief. And I found myself over the last few weeks actually talking to clients about that, and to put information in about the company, so say about 30% of information that's global for everybody to understand, and then get the managers to put the other 70% of that communication together. And what you get there is a nice blend of the corporate stuff alongside the more relative stuff to that person. And I've tried using that in every organisation I've worked in, and it's had different success, but in general, it's been very successful. So I think we do look at some of the back to basics things. Those of you familiar with Maslow and the hierarchy of needs, when we went into lockdown at the beginning and the situation with the toilet rolls, it was very clear, for obvious reasons, it was very clear that the people went straight back to the bottom level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So self-esteem and things like that was, while still important, we were worried about how we were going to get food. We were worried about how we were going to get toilet rolls. So back to basics to me is a good starting point. So always think about, you know, what have you done in the past that's worked, and maybe look at that again. If people are not motivated, and this is more of a what happens if people haven't got motivation, it's when you bring your business back on track, and I guess most of you are in a situation where it will be over a period of time, and you're not going to say, right, tomorrow 100% of the workforce is working again. It's how far will people go to make sure that your business is back on track. If they're motivated, they will really want to have that spirit of, come on, we're all in this together. If you haven't contacted them and there's been nothing at all in the period of time you've been closed, and you suddenly expect them to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, the chances are they may not be. So it's keeping people engaged now, communicating them will get them back on track. So some top tips on communication to finish off this section. We need to find some way of having an informal interaction that's away from Zoom and Teams. And I don't know whether you see on social media and on various things that, you know, people are getting a bit zoomed out. I don't know if that's actually a verb, but people are getting, you know, tired of the Zoom thing. You know, they're doing things on Zoom with their families, they're doing quizzes on Zoom. So it's what other things can we use to actually make it a bit more social. In our organisation, we've got a WhatsApp group. We've had it now for about 2 years, and we just share anything on there. Sometimes in the evenings, you know, we'll have a discussion about what's on the TV. Somebody will ask, you know, what can they watch on a box set. But we don't talk about work on it. We just keep it really for social stuff, and that's still being used to quite an extent, as well as all the other communication that we've got. So I think it's important that you have a separate piece away from the business communication. So find a way of informal interaction if you can. The next one is to have weekly updates and quizzes. I don't think if people are on furlough, and I think I'm okay saying this, that, you know, anything that you do that's social wouldn't breach any furlough restrictions. So we've been having quizzes on a Wednesday. Somebody's been setting the quizzes, and we've got a bit of a table, a league table going on, and most people participate in that. And it's fun. We make mistakes on it. People put silly answers on it, and people get cut off and come back again, and it just kind of releases a bit of that tension, because there's nothing worse, and you've probably seen this yourself, when you're talking to your people on Zoom or on Teams, and you're giving them an update. It's very difficult as a leader of a business to have people sitting looking at you all with very expectant faces, petrified that you're going to give them some bad news. So if you can intermingle it with something like a quiz, or just asking people what they've been up to over the last week. It's amazing what new skills people are learning. Some people are learning new languages. People are starting to do DIY. We've got people that are painting, drawing. So I think, you're finding out more about people. And I think if people find out more about their work colleagues that they didn't possibly know, again, that's a good motivator. The other tip really is to be honest about the company situation, no surprises. And I can imagine now there's loads of questions in your head that you want to put forward and say, yeah, well, that's easier said than done. But you do have to manage expectations. I worked for an organisation many years ago that had to make some redundancies, and it had a policy of always giving positive information on the team meetings, because we had the team meeting structure. And when we actually did go through the situation regarding reducing the size of the workforce, the comments we got back was, well, we all thought everything was okay. And really, that was much worse than if we told them the whole situation. So you have to be selective in what you say. You can sweeten things up a little bit, but if you're constantly sugarcoating everything and saying, well, we're all right, everything's going to be okay, and then it isn't, then that's your credibility, and that's them to completely switched off. And then we have to think about everybody else that's involved as well and how they feel. So be honest about the situation. Don't have any surprises. And if you do have bad news, deliver it as such and move on. Don't wrap it up in fluff. Deliver what you've got to say. Don't labour on it, and keep moving on to the other things. And you'll find that if people get used to that combination of, I will tell you as it is, and we'll talk about the other stuff after, and we'll talk about the positive stuff, I think people are more accepting of that. We have a question, I think. Oh.
Let's have a look what we've got. So do you want me to read out the question for you, Wendy?
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
So Danielle says, hi, how can we balance positive communication, for example, quizzes, competitions, with the fact that we have to make compulsory redundancies? This has already been announced, but it would be good to know any tips that you have for still keeping those that are still working positive.
Yeah, thanks for that, Danielle. I think for me, the key thing is making sure that you're explaining to people that you are protecting the jobs going forward. And I think that's where you have the dividing line. So yes, you are having a situation with redundancies on one hand, but actually we're doing this, and that's the communication piece. We're making people redundant. It's unfortunate and it's very sad, but it's to protect the jobs going forward. And if you go back to one of the comments I made earlier, it was about saying, you have to act quickly and you have to do it and get it out of the way, so that then you can start to build things back up again. It's a terrible situation to be in, I know, and you have to be sensitive. You can't, make someone redundant in the morning and then have a quiz in the afternoon. But I think it's about the people that are left. They're the ones that you have to really worry about. If we're in a situation where people are leaving the business, then they have left the business, whether they've left it physically or in their mind, they've left the business. And what you have to concentrate on is getting that positivity back for the people that are left. Does that answer the question, Danielle?
Well, I don't think we've got any more at the moment, Wendy. So, hang on a sec. Oh, yep. No, that's just Danielle saying that.
Okay.
Brilliant. So continue.
Okay, thank you. Wrapping things in fluff is one of my favourite sayings. For some reason, we can't go on to the next slide now. I don't know what's happened. Oh, there we go. Okay, so training. Something that I think when a recession comes along, or when hard times come along, training is always the thing that's binned. And as we're a training provider as a company, it was the first area of the business where people started to cancel on us quite quickly. It's seen as a luxury in this country, unfortunately, other than mandatory training. But training, is something that people tend to say we can't do it. But actually, in this time, even with furloughed people, training is a really important thing, because you have got time to get people to train. And one of the other plus sides of that is, while they're training, they're keeping their minds active. There are thousands and thousands of free online courses that are out there at the moment, and some of them require a subscription to maybe receive emails or something like that going forward. But there's loads of stuff on there. There's stuff on sustainability. There's things on everything you can think of. And I think, if you can encourage people to start to look at those, they can do training whilst they're furloughed, and it will keep their motivation going to actually feel part of something. Having furloughed people in our business, one of the issues that they have is they have a feeling of being guilty, because their colleagues are working flat out for potentially only 20% more than the furloughed colleagues who are making sheds in the garden and sitting at home sunbathing and drinking cocktails. So there is a guilty feeling of the furloughed employees to some extent. And I think you have to try and get them motivated to do things. So at least then they feel like when they come back into the workplace, they're actually, they are more enriched than before they went off. So it is about encouraging that. Speaking to our clients, there are, people are falling into different categories with regards to furlough. There are some people that keep themselves very busy. But with the mental health issues, if we can get people trained up, then I think that makes a big difference to their mental well-being as well. And I've mentioned about the websites that can provide free training. You can see what area I'm from with a Rubik's Cube on the right-hand side. Okay. I think the other thing that we need to remember is that, and this is just a point of reference really, that licenses and certificates may run out while we're in this furlough period. And you do need to make sure that you're keeping up to date with things like your health and safety training. So first aid certificates, manual handling, fire training, that kind of thing. You can carry on doing that. And there are companies such as ourselves that actually now are able to deliver online training and to do virtual classrooms and to do distance training as well. So people can do some self-learning as well as getting some tutoring. And I think, all that can be done by the video call. So don't think, all my licenses are running out, what do I do? There is resource out there to keep people trained as you go through. And it might be an opportunity for people that are furloughed, if you haven't got enough first aiders, or you need more manual handling, to actually utilise that time to get more first aiders in your organisation, for example. I've put here, keep in touch with apprentices. And the same applies to graduates and apprentices, really. They've just come into the world of work and they've left school, they're working for you, and all of a sudden they find themselves at home all day. It was very, very easy for them to get into a habit of staying in bed till lunchtime, just not doing anything in particular, moping around the house. And I think, it's very, very easy to lose engagement of young people. It's very hard to get their engagement in the first place. So I think, is there something that you can do with your young people to keep them motivated? I would imagine anybody that's working with customer services or in a call centre where you've got quite a young workforce, that, if you have them working, that's probably not too bad. But for the ones that are furloughed, then, it's really important that you keep in touch with them and make them feel like they're still part of a team. And again, that's where the training comes in. But maybe some kind of fun training rather than, they will already have their apprenticeship training, but you don't want to give them something that's really boring like an Excel course or something like that. Try and think about how it would, a young person would react to that. And then something that's very close to my heart, leadership development. We've all been through such a lot of change, and I think leaders have had to adapt more than they've ever had to. And we've just kind of been thrust into this situation, and we're all in the same situation with it to different degrees. But if you want to change things and you want to see this as an opportunity to change things, then spend time with your leadership team and get some plans in place for leadership development. You might not be able to do it today, you might not be able to do it tomorrow, but if you start to get those plans in place, then that gives motivation for those people who think, yes, there is a future for me within this business, because they're the ones that have had to deliver all this bad news. It would be nice to motivate them by giving them some options for the future. And if you don't want them to sink into the old way of, we go back to work, everything's the same as it was before, then this opportunity has passed us by. So really think about your leadership development. Working in homeschooling, I don't know whether you've all probably seen people on this situation who've got children at home. Most of my team, when we've been on video calls, who are working, well, in fact, all the team who are working have got children, and they found it really, really tough. I think they've started to get used to it a little bit, but we're in a situation now where they just got used to having the kids at home, and they've been doing the homeschooling, and then now some of them may be going back to school, some of them might not be going back to school. Is it going to be before the school holidays? Have we got childcare facilities available to us? We haven't got grandparents anymore we can send them to. So I think when I wrote this, which was towards the end of last week, it probably wasn't as much of an issue, but I think it's come back on the agenda again now. And I think we have to remember that it's okay to have kids screaming in the background when you're on a call. Everyone's in the same situation. It's really difficult. And here, a motivational tool will be to, keep, allow people to work into the evenings if it's possible. Don't expect them during the day when they're meant to be doing homeschooling to try and do their work as well, because you won't get joy from either of those things, and you'll just leave your people feeling that they haven't got a lot of worth really. They're letting you down. They're letting the homeschooling down. So in our business, what we've done is a couple of the designers have decided that they will do what they do during the day, be available for some core hours, and then they're quite happy to do stuff in an evening when the kids have gone to bed. And I'm more than happy to do that. I know not everyone's in that situation, but it's about giving people some slack, because I see the stress on their faces every time a child interrupts or they start fighting or whatever, and it's a feeling of dread. I don't want people to feel that they feel like that, because that doesn't help them and it doesn't help motivate them. So think about it as we go forward with things like childcare. I think after school clubs will be quite difficult to get people into, and I think we have to be very prepared to be flexible. It depends upon what kind of workload people have got, then they can actually maybe do some work at weekends and things like that. I'm not saying that get them to work 60 hours a week, but just make sure that you can spread it out a bit. I think going forward, if that's what you decide to do as an organisation, where you are going to have more flexibility, and I think 90% of businesses will say that people working from home has been successful. I think you have to remember that there is also the legislative impact of that. So yes, it's great now saying, oh yeah, I think you can have Fridays off every week, and I think you can work from home 2 days a week. But please remember that you need to amend your contracts of employment accordingly, because if you don't, it's all nice now, but in the future when you're trying to make changes or something happens that you need to make a change, if they're still under their old contract, then that's going to be very demotivating if you try and then to change it 2 years down the line. So just think about the legal aspects of what you're doing. Be positive about child interaction. I personally don't have any children, but it's been great actually getting to know the children of the people that work for us. And some of them come and wave when they see me on screen now. Some of them hide behind the sofa sometimes. But don't frown upon it. Try and make it as easy as possible for people. And I think you'll get the loyalty, and you'll get more motivation from it. I've been reading on stats about productivity at home, and I think in general, and this is a general comment, most people are more productive at home because they don't have the office chat. They're not standing by the kettle making a brew for 10 minutes. and all the things that come with that. So actually, if somebody's working for you in the office for say 40 hours a week, they might only be productive for probably 15 hours a week. And believe you me, that is a stat that I've seen bandied around. So if people are working from home and they are a lot more productive, then a few less hours that they're working for you to do schoolwork will reap dividends in the future. So don't pile on top of what's already a difficult situation. So what about recognition and the future? Employees working versus the furloughed employees not working on an 80% pay. I think when they started out, a lot of companies I worked with, and it'd be interesting to see, what your views are on this. But when I started doing this, a lot of companies said, we're going to make up the 20% pay of the furloughed employees up to 100%. And that was when we thought it was going to be a short-term measure. I'm now having conversations with clients that are saying, actually, we've got some backlash from the people that are working at the moment, and it's starting to impact their motivation. So can we go back on that, and can we change that? And I think you have the right to review this as and when you're going along, because we're all having to adapt and change as we're going through this. But if you have that going on in your organisation, just be prepared that at some point, if people who are furloughed are working really hard and they see that people are taking painting classes or whatever, that might create some resentment in the future. And I think you have to recognise that. So how do we prevent resentment? Well, there's a few things I've written down here that I think could make a big difference. So people that have been working, and they've been working really hard over the period, one of the answers could be to give them priority on holidays for the remainder of the year. That we've got this backlog of holidays that's starting to accrue now, and that will just get worse as time goes on. Yes, the government has given us a period of 2 years to be able to allow people to take holidays, but actually the people that are working now and the ones that have been working flat out will be exhausted, I would imagine, by June, July time, and when they would normally be taking family holidays. So I think the important thing is to set your stall out now and to actually give them priority for holidays for the remainder of the year, and be prepared to defer some of the furloughed staff's holidays. Send them a small gift in the post. I have put in a bit further in the presentation about food isn't going to be a motivator necessarily, because whilst it was while we were in the office, I think people have had laser time to consume copious amounts of food and alcohol, and probably are not going to be that motivated by that. But there are companies out there now. I sent something the other day where you can have 20 chocolate bars in a box, and you can put a personal message in, and it wasn't that expensive. So I think you can send the workers a small gift in the post, and just show them just a little thank you or something for the children. Or one of the things we're looking to do, and I don't want to spoil the surprise for people, is we're looking to send something out to our people that have been working, that is just for them and their partner, to enjoy over a weekend. That's made it sound quite sordid now I've said that, but you kind of get the idea of what I'm saying. Allow them to take an early finish on a Friday for the last quarter of the year. So when everybody else is back in, then allow them to finish a bit early. Send them a thank you card. I don't think we can underestimate a handwritten, not something that you send through Moonpig, but an actual card that you write and you put a personal message in there and just explain why they're so important to you. It costs a stamp and a card. And then also things like sending the children small gifts. One of the things I was thinking of today is, we've been trying to get children to read more whilst they've been off, and maybe some kind of Amazon voucher, or send them a book that's relevant to their age, so they've got something to remember it by, and put a personal message in it to say, your mum and daddy have worked hard, please enjoy reading this book with them, or something. Post COVID-19 and rewards. Long service awards, I've actually started to think very differently, having been a big advocate of long service awards over the years. I think as time's gone on and the workforce is changing, we are seeing people change the way they approach work, and 5 years is quite a long time for somebody to work for one organisation now. I think you should consider, if you're doing long service awards, potentially scrapping them and coming up with something a bit different. I'm not sure they add value if you've got a 25-year award. We've got a question, I think. No?
Yep, sorry about that, Wendy. It just takes a while for my mute button to come off.
Thought you'd gone to sleep there, Laura.
No, not at all. So Michelle's just asked, she doesn't think that personally in her organisation that recognising workers differently would go down very well. In her company, it looks like the furloughed workers would say it's not their choice to be furloughed. So she's wondering whether it would be right to sort of give favourable treatment towards those that haven't.
I think it depends on the culture of your organisation. I think from my perspective and what I see, there's a massive amount of respect from the furloughed workers to the people that are actually doing the work, because quite often they've picked up the work of two lots of people. So I think then that's okay, and I don't think there would be an issue with that. If that's not in your culture, then I would argue that the people who are furloughed, yes, they've had 80% less pay, but they haven't been buying sandwiches every day. They haven't had the transport into work. They haven't paid parking charges and all the things that go with that. So probably on balance, they're not that much different. It probably isn't their fault that they've been furloughed, but the fact of the matter is, if there wasn't the furlough scheme and people weren't doing stuff back at the office, then they probably would have been made redundant some time ago. I think you have to balance what your culture is in your organisation, and that's a bit of a sitting on your fence answer, really. But there's got to be some way of recognising those people, and like I said, giving them priority on holidays, even if you do just that. I don't think that would be seen as wrong. I hope that helps.
Yes, it is a difficult question to answer, Wendy, but yeah. And is there anything else? Is that okay in terms of answer for you, Michelle? Bear with me, just in case she's... Michelle, if there is anything else that you want to ask. Yes, brilliant. Okay, so she says yes, thanks. So thank you, Wendy, brilliant. So whenever you're ready to continue, Wendy, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I think going forward, our cultures probably need to change more about recognising short-term team goals, the here and now, and not relating to a year ago, because we were in a very different place a year ago. So I've tried to give a few ideas of what we can do here. I think a great opportunity is for us to have hero awards, and that's where people have done community work. They've been managing a family. Key workers, we see a lot of stuff for the key workers, but there are other key workers other than the NHS workers, such as drivers and things. Recognise people who've had losses potentially and soldiered on regardless, because whether we like it or not, there will be people in our organisations that have been affected by people passing away or being very ill and having to balance all those things. So I think that could be something that any company can do and can introduce hero awards. It's not related to your core values, it's not corporate, it's about how people feel and what they've done personally. So my top tips on motivation going forward really are about, don't get tied up with the food thing. I think most people are going to be on a diet when they get back into the workplace. It's thinking of different things, and if you are going to do the food thing, instead of cakes and stuff like that, is to think about the healthier options. Don't make people to go back to the office unless you have to. Consider further home working to ensure the total safety of your people. I think what I'm seeing is, that companies are saying, oh, we need to get back into the office now because everybody needs to be together. And I don't think it's doubted about the fact that people with social interaction with each other are more motivated. But talking to people that, I've been talking to, and I talk to a lot of people in the course of a week, there is a massive fear about going back outside and going back into the workplace, despite the social distancing and the tape on the floor and the perspex screens that you can get. If people don't have to go back into work, then keep them at home until such time that it's safe for them to go back, because you'll take a lot of pressure off them. Twitter is a it's a hot topic today. Twitter have told their employees that they don't have to go back to the office again. And I think going forward, we're going to see a massive change in this office-based culture of people having to go in every day, having to be at the desk for 9 o'clock, finishing at 5. I think we can be more flexible. And I think one thing this has really forced us into doing is it suited us to have people working from home, and it's worked out okay in general. So before it was, we don't know how it will work, we don't know whether people will be working, will they be at the desk at certain times. I think we've proven in general that it's working okay. So keep people at home if you can, because you'll take some of that stress away, and you'll save electricity and all sorts of other bills in your offices. Provide learning opportunities. I've said before, it's counterintuitive because of cost potentially. But if people have had to change anyway because of the situation they're in, the chances are they're more likely to learn new things. I don't know how many of you have actually considered doing something different. I've started learning Spanish, for example. And I wouldn't have had the time to do it before. I wouldn't have had the motivation to do it before, but because I'm thinking about new things all the time, it's made it easy for me to start doing something a bit different myself and challenging myself. So just bear that in mind. Another thing is about reorganisation. You've heard about the right people on the bus. Well, that's okay, but you need people in the right seats as well, which is quite topical, bearing in mind our social distancing at the moment. But this is the time to consider reorganisation. There could be a lot of people that you work with that are in the wrong job, and they're unhappy because they're in the wrong job. And this is a time to maybe get to know your aspirations of what your people like to do, what they'd like to do in the future, and using the time to find those things out so that you could actually put them in the right seat. And as a consequence, you can raise the morale and motivation in your organisation. So, reorganisation doesn't always have to be making people redundant and a negative. Reorganisation can be actually finding out what people want to do and maybe giving them opportunity to do things they would never have done before. We talk about well-being to death, really. Counselling and coaching is very important for mental health. People might not want to come back because they're scared. I already know of a couple of people where they've opened up their premises again this week, and people don't want to come into work because they have a partner at home that's still vulnerable. And yeah, we've got all the rules with the legislation on that, but actually it's a psychological thing as opposed to a physical thing. So I think having wellbeing programs in place is quite good. For those of you that don't use pay care or any of those medical where you pay a few pounds a week to get dental and optical care, a lot of them have got access to an online doctor and employee assistance programs, so they can actually ring somebody up if they've got financial issues, if they've got mental health issues. And for that small investment, it could be something that's quite positive for your people, and then you could get the benefits from that. A word of caution on that, though, is if you do introduce something like that, is to make sure that it's well communicated, because take up on those things is quite low unless you keep that message going through how positive it is. Despite furlough, and we've got one example of that on the webinar this afternoon, redundancies will still happen, and some companies may close. And it's about thinking about the outplacements of those people. What options have you got available for them if you are in that situation? And having been in a situation where I've had to make people redundant over the years working in HR, quite often after 6 or 12 months you end up taking quite a high percentage of those people back again when the work picks up. It's not just an opportunity to get rid of your deadwood, it's actually an opportunity to bring people back as work improves. So if you treat them badly now, then the chances are they'll never come back to you. And if they're highly skilled and highly talented people that for no fault of either of you, you have to make redundant, be careful how you treat them, because you may wish them to come back in the future. And if you treat people badly and it gets out there, you'll demotivate your remaining workforce. Another thing for motivating people is ask people what they want. there's all sorts of polls that you can do where you can interact with people. It might be, we're thinking about changing the office chairs, or we're thinking of changing the colour of the walls in the office when everybody comes back. And get something going, and that's something fun, because it's important that you understand how they are feeling. It's not just how they're performing. And if you go back to one of my first slides where in 2008, it was you're lucky you've got a job, that certainly isn't the case now. And when we go back into trying to get back to some kind of normality, whatever that looks like, you may find that quite a high number of your people, especially if you've got an aging workforce, they may take this opportunity to say, actually, I'm not coming back. I'm going to retire. I'm going to take early retirement. I'm going to do something different. And a prime example of that is nursing and the transport industry. Average driver is probably in his 50s. They've suddenly been thinking about retirement, and then they're suddenly thrust into being a key worker. That may change the way in which they want to move on going forward. They may decide to go part-time. They may want to work as many hours. So instead of having this massive, surplus of talent, it might be that we suddenly end up where we've got talent that isn't there that we thought we had, and it's how we deal with that. We have a question, I think.
Brilliant, Wendy. So we've got one from Danielle. Is there any guidance about questionnaires we can send to employees to gauge how they are currently feeling, and would this be an appropriate thing to do at this time?
Yes, there are different things that you can do. You can go from a full-blown survey that people can fill in about the whole lot. I probably would be careful with that, or you can just have a topic. So you could think of something that is something that's relevant in the workplace, and you can just do a one-pager where you say, right, this is what we're thinking of doing. What do people think? So it doesn't have to be anything formal. It can be quite an informal thing. So I would say, yes, you should be testing the temperature of the workforce at the moment. Don't be afraid of communicating, and don't be afraid of the answers that come back, because if you take action on a few of those things, again, when everybody is back to some normality, they actually think, yeah, they did listen when we were in times of crisis, rather than they didn't listen. So I would recommend, yes, you do, but maybe not too heavy. Is that okay?
Danielle, are you happy with that answer? Yes, she's fine with that. Thank you, Wendy. You can continue.
Okay. I'm coming to close to the end now. Motivation going forward on top tips instead of Christmas parties, because I know we're all not sure about whether the hotels and bars and restaurants will be open. Think about family gifts as a thank you to all of them for helping you work through this. So if you have got budgets for that and it hasn't been cut, think about how to spend it in a slightly different way. This COVID has been all about family to me. Don't just send out random gifts to individuals. You can wait until after lockdown. I've talked about the cards. People have had to be very human, and they've had to display their souls with you on Zoom and things like that about where they live and how they live. So make sure that you're human as well. And my final thoughts really are that this hasn't been working from home. It's been dealing with the pandemic. The Dunkirk spirit won't last forever unless you're supportive, communicative, honest and clear. Some people may have lost loved ones. They worry about elderly relatives, and school and children are all taking their toll on your people. So the most important thing you can reward them and motivate them with is compassion. And I very strongly feel that. So that's the end of my presentation. As you can probably appreciate, a lot of the things I've talked about today, we also provide as a service, as a business, which is why I'm able to share these things with you. But if anybody does want to email me, please feel free to do so on a private matter if you want to. My email address is wendy@strategisolutions.co.uk. And I'm more than happy to respond individually if you have any other questions. But we've got a few minutes left, so are there any other questions that people want to ask?
So Wendy, Stephen's just said in the chat there, excellent point about the aspirations of staff and business owners in whatever is to come the new normal. He's just based at home and recently took up space in Keel's uni at the Denise Coates building. and he's not been there over 2 months, but he says so much to consider and thank you for today. So that's brilliant feedback.
Oh, thank you.
So
thank you. I think we are going to think seriously about office accommodation and working from home. But I do think if this is just a temporary measure, we are expecting people to work at home longer term. We have to carry out risk assessments, and we have to make sure those people are not sitting at a dining room chair. They have to make sure that it's something that is sustainable. So just a health and safety word of caution there.
Absolutely, Wendy. Thank you very much. For those of you that are still here, I know that we're just about to come up to the hour session. Does anybody have any other questions for Wendy? So you can pop them in the chat, in the Q&A. You can raise your hand if you want to speak your question. I'll give you a couple of give you a couple of minutes just to pop your questions in the chat, because I know that it takes a while to type questions out, so just give you a couple of seconds. Or if anybody wants to speak their question live. Just pop my screen back up there, Wendy, for you so that you've got some company.
Feel a bit lonely looking at the laptop.
Exactly. I thought I'd just pop that up. No, just some really good feedback in the chat, Wendy, just saying great session. Just check again. So Kate Taylor in the chat just says, great to hear about the variety of rewards and recognition ideas, such as thank you cards and gifts. Is there anything you may suggest for a large manufacturing organisation, 700 with around 200 working from home, which is still running BAU?
I think it depends how, what the budget is to do something. I don't think we can underestimate the handwritten card piece. And I don't mean just printing something out that's got the corporate logo on it. I mean actually getting, cards to relevant to the people and getting people to, put something in there. Those chocolate ideas are quite good, and I know I try to veer away from food, but there are companies that do an afternoon tea, and they're about 15 quid. And you can send an afternoon tea out via the post to your employees. Now, if you've got the budget to do that, that would be fantastic. And you could have some kind of thing where people are sending in the photographs of enjoying their afternoon tea on the garden, on the lawn and things, and put something in like a mosaic or something on your wall when you go back into work where everybody shared those pictures. So it doesn't have to be high cost, but I think it's the maximum impact, and I think that was something quite nice to do if you've got the cash for it.
Is that okay answer for you, Kate? Yeah, she says thank you. Brilliant.
Okay.
Fantastic. Anybody else with any questions? I think that's probably all the questions that we've got for today, Wendy. Thank you so much. Your details, I will, if you're happy for me to share that with people that want them, I'm quite happy to give those out. And again, my details as well will be on the email that you received with the confirmation of this webinar today. Wendy, once again, thank you so much for today. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for listening, everyone.
No, I'm sure everybody really and thoroughly enjoyed it just as much as I did. So great everybody for attending. Like I said, you can get a copy of this on our webinar library on the Staffordshire Chamber of Commerce website, and there are plenty of other webinars for you to watch at your leisure on our webinar library as well. Brilliant everybody. Thank you ever so much, and everybody stay safe, and we'll see you all very soon.
Bye everyone. Bye.